Our first reading today comes from the Gospel according to St. John, the 11th chapter. When Mary arrived where Jesus was and saw him, she fell on his feet and said, "Lord, if you had just been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her crying, and those who had come with her crying also, Jesus was deeply disturbed in his spirit, and he was troubled. And he asked, "Where have you laid Lazarus?" And they replied, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus began to cry. And the Jews said, "Look how much he loved him." But some of them said, "This man cured the eyes of the man born blind. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" Jesus was once again deeply disturbed, and he came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stove covered the entrance. And Jesus said, "Remove the stone." But Martha, the sister of the dead man, said, "Lord, the smell will be awful. He's been dead for 4 days." Jesus replied, "Didn't I tell you that if you believe, you will see God's glory?" And so they removed the stone in front of Lazarus' tomb. Jesus looked up and prayed, "Father, thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me. I say this for the benefit of the crowd standing here so that they will believe that you sent me." Having said this, Jesus shouted with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, and his hands and feet were bound, and his face was covered with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Says the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Secondly, from Psalm 102, verses 1 through 11. Typo there. Sorry about that, folks. Psalm 102, verses 1 through 11. Double checking, making sure I'm reading the right thing. This happens sometimes. Psalm 102. The psalmist says, "Lord, hear my prayer. Let my cry reach to you. Don't hide your face from me in times of trouble. Listen to me. Answer me quickly as I cry out to you. Because my days, they disappear like smoke, and my bones are burned up as if in an oven, and my heart is smashed like dried up grass. I even forget to eat my food because of my intense groans of sadness. My bones, so much so that my bones are protruding from my skin. I'm like some sort of wild owl screeching out in the desert. I lie awake all night. I'm all alone, like a bird on a roof. All day long my enemies make fun of me. Those who mock me curse by using my name. I've been eating ashes instead of bread. I've been mixing tears into my drinks because of your anger and your wrath, because you picked me up and you threw me away. My days are like a shadow, gone. I'm dried up like dead grass. This too is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. We are talking in this season about how God has created us for worship. God has created us to worship. Last week we talked some about the importance of being clear about who it is that we worship. Today I want to talk a little bit more about what worship is. You see, a lot of what we think about worship is worship as praise, right? And praise is great. Lord, I lift your name on high. How great is our God? 10,000 reasons for my heart to sing. We praise. And that's fantastic. Perhaps even we could learn to praise a little bit better. Keep singing, I lift my hands until we get our hands out of our pockets on Sunday mornings. Praise is an important part of our worship. But it's only part. The other half of worship is this thing called lament. And lament is deeply scriptural. Lament is defined as a passionate expression of sorrow or grief. Passionate expression of sorrow or grief. It's so important that the Psalms are woven through with these songs of lament. There's a whole book of the Bible called Lament. That's how important it is. It's got its own book. It's woven throughout the Gospels and Paul's letters as well, the prophets. Lament is deeply scriptural for us, but we're just not good at it. Right? And it starts with how we interact with one another. I come up to you and I greet you and I say, how are things going in your life? And you go, fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. We've got this mask that we wear in much of our lives. The mask of fine. The mask of everything's going okay. The mask of I'm dealing with everything just fine. That somehow if some crack were to show in this mask, that somehow if we were to let people know that everything wasn't okay with us, we would be a failure. We wouldn't be able to keep our friends and our jobs and our relationships. Did you hear what the psalmist said? Like, this stuff was written 3,000 years ago. I lie awake all night. My days pass before me like shadows. I'm so upset I can't even eat, says the psalmist. You say, how are you? The psalmist says, my bones are crushed. There's no fine in the Psalms. Because life is not always sunshine and roses. Life isn't always fine. Life has struggles and hardships and heartbreak and worry and grief. Life has pandemics that seem like they're never going to end. Life has arguments with family members. Life has it all. And when we worship God, God asks us to bring all that we are, not just the good stuff. I want you to think for a moment about the people that are closest to you in your life. The people that you call when things go wrong, or who you miss when you actually don't talk for a couple of weeks. The people that you tell everything. I don't know about you, but those people in my life are the ones who were there with me when I walked through the valley of the shadow of death. The people that I'm closest to in life are the people that held my heart in their hands when it was in two pieces. Those are the relationships that matter the most. Not the people who are there when everything is fine. Not just the people who are there to celebrate when things go great, but the people who are there when it doesn't, when it's all broken, when it's terrible. The people who, when they ask how you are, you say, this sucks. And they go, yeah, it does. I go, yeah, it does. God wants to be that person. And until we can be that for one another, we only have half of a community. We only have half of a relationship with one another in the body of Christ and with God in faith. Sorrow and grief, lament, are holy. I come back again and again and again to this story in John 11. It's a fantastic story. It takes up most of chapter 11, this story of the death and resurrection of Lazarus. And it makes more sense when you understand that Lazarus and Mary and Martha are probably Jesus's like besties, right? Like these are the people who, when he comes to town, he crashes on their couch. Literally, like that's what happens. Every time he goes to Jerusalem, he stops in Bethany and he crashes on Mary and Martha and Lazarus's couch. He doesn't call ahead, he just shows up. He's that kind of friend. And Lazarus has died. And Mary and Martha are heartbroken. They're so heartbroken that when Jesus shows up, their grief looks like anger. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus doesn't say, why are you angry at me? It's not my fault. Notice what else he doesn't say. It's okay, God has a plan. He doesn't say it's all going to work out in the end. He doesn't say look for the silver lining. He says, this sucks. Jesus, and it's that one line, right? Or John 11:34, I think, that line that every confirmation student, when I tell them to memorize a Bible verse, wants to memorize this one. Jesus wept. Jesus wept. But it's so important. You see, Jesus knows that he has the power to raise Lazarus from the dead. Jesus knows that it's all going to work out in the end. Jesus knows that things are going to get better. And you know what he does? He weeps. Because the fact that it's going to work out in the end doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt now. The fact that God is going to bring about healing and resurrection doesn't mean that it's not heartbreaking now. The fact that God is leading us to something better, and we believe that with all of our hearts, doesn't make it less a cause of grief and sorrow and lament now. Jesus wept. If anybody in all of creation and all of history knew that it was going to be okay, it was Jesus. And Jesus wept. He didn't cheer people up. He didn't make them feel better. He wept with them. That is community. That is faith. That is worship. That's what we call lament. Until we learn to lament together as a community of faith, as neighborhoods and communities where we live together, as a nation, until we learn to lament, we can never heal together. Until we lament together, we can never heal together. Lament is the thing that opens up our souls to relationship, to faith, to healing, and to resurrection. Lament is the thing that opens up our souls. Too often what we do is we turn to prayer and praise even when our hearts don't feel it. We turn to prayer and praise and we fake it till we make it. And that can be okay sometimes. But sometimes all that is putting back on the mask of it's fine. Denying that there are things around us that are heartbreaking and sad and sorrow-inducing. Not letting anyone know with the psalmist that we have been up through the night, weeping silent tears. Not letting anyone know with the psalmist that we're so upset we can't eat. Pretending even to God that everything's fine. Thanks for asking. It's a great song. We've sung it once or twice before, and it's one of my favorites. It's called Lift Every Voice and Sing. It was written at the beginning of the 20th century, and it was declared by the NAACP to be the national anthem of the African American community. And I love it because it does name what is great. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Let our rejoicing rise high, high as the listening skies. But then in the middle of it has these lines. God of our weary years. It's been a weary year. It's been a weary 2 years. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, who has brought us forever on this way. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. I bet I don't know a single adult who doesn't have a way that has been watered with tears. But I'm fine, thanks. Lament is hard. Lament requires us to be vulnerable, to admit that we can't do everything, that we can't always be positive, that it's not always working out just the way we planned, that maybe we need help. But until we turn and ask for help, how do we get it? If we can do it all on our own, why do we need God? If I can knit together all the broken pieces of my life without the God of resurrection, why bother with this faith thing? Now we need a faith like the psalmist. My God, why have you forsaken me? Psalm 22 and Jesus' words from the cross. My God, walk with me through the valley of the shadow of death. Psalm 23. We need a faith that cries out in our need, that cries out in our sorrow, that cries out in our grief, that cries out in our worry, to a God who can do something about it. To a God of resurrection who can call us out of those places and into the light and life and joy that we are created for. The Psalms do this thing where they start with lament. Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? And they end with praise. All generations will call you blessed from this day forward, O God, the end of Psalm 22, the part that we don't have memorized. All generations will call you blessed from this day forward. Because the way to real praise, the way to praise a God who's done something in our lives, the way to praise a God who's healed in our lives, the way to praise a God that has brought about resurrection and new life in our lives is to meet that God in the valley of the shadow of death. The way to find an Easter God is to go to a Good Friday God. The way to find a community that can hold us together is to reach out in our times of need. Lament is necessary in all of our worship. We need our souls to open up to the places where we are broken and dying so that God can bring about resurrection, so that our lives are more than the mask of, I'm fine, thanks for asking. Lament. Lament is the only way to end at the destination of real and meaningful praise.